episode 2 of Upstate Vuew, a podcast highlighting local entrepreneurs, creatives, doers, content creators, artists, and much more. Basically anyone that could be listed on the directory site I just put out. Today's guest is a good friend of mine, Mr. Pat Fricola, who is a registered nurse for a nursing home in Rome, New York. I'm going to let Pat talk a little bit more about his credentials and what he does at the nursing home.
So I'm a registered nurse. I'm a registered nurse since May of 2015. My latest position is the infection preventionist and the staff educator, staff development coordinator. So anything that has to do with infectious disease processes, communicable diseases, as well as, like I said, staff education development.
Pat's also recently, well, it's been probably over a year now, started a podcast, kind of nursing content brand called Nurse Nation Media. Has it been a year? How long has it been?
Yeah, it's been over a year. It's actually coming up close to almost a year since we've actually released an episode. But that's a whole other story.
It's been almost a year. It's been a year since you released the first episode.
No, from my latest, episode 9.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Wow.
It started just as kind of a sociological study on social media. If I start something just from scratch, not involving any of the people that I already follow on social media, not involving, trying to give myself shout outs on my page with my followers I already have on personal accounts. It was okay, what does it take to build something just from the ground up? Is there a way to beat the algorithm by just putting in, just right here on this one profile?
Just straight organic growth by hashtags, following people, and just engaging with like-minded people.
So it started off that way. And then I released some of the episodes, and I wanted to get into, it originally was, one of the biggest things that you learn as a nurse is education. Education of, your residents, your patients. Evidence-based practice shows that the more educated somebody is about something that's going on with them or something that's about to happen with them, the better your outcomes are. So my first idea, and go back to the first episode, it's just me kind of in the car giving a rundown of what I wanted to do, what the vision was. It was trying to get nurses in from all different aspects of healthcare to kind of explain what they do, why they do what they do, and what people could expect if they're ever in that position or need that type of care. And then I kind of realized I don't really like talking to people. Not that I don't like talking to people, but sometimes if having those full-blown conversations, it's, to me, I kind of get bored with that kind of stuff. So if I'm getting bored with it, I'm not just going to put it out there and hope that someone else isn't going to be bored with it. So I kind of wanted to tailor it and kind of take it in a different direction. And then just things with work and personal life just kind of started going crazy, and it just wasn't a lot. I didn't have a lot of time to actually create content for the podcast side, but it's turned into something more than just podcasts and social media. I'm using more of the Twitter side of the social media, of the Nurse Nation media. There's no more traditional news outlets. There's no more traditional media. It's now, legacy media. Twitter in and of itself, at least for my uses, is just a running timeline of just news. It's where I get all my news updates. You have your verified people, who you can trust, people are calling people out for fact checks all the time on Twitter, which is always nice. It sparks conversation. But that's kind of where I've been focusing more of the, on the Twitter side of the social media, of the content stuff. Not I'm producing content, but I've been using it to kind of keep tabs on what other places are doing for their infection control, all this corona stuff going on. There's a lot of different nurse educators that kind of put out a lot of content about how they approach different type of education sessions, or how they increase their numbers of people actually attending their education sessions within facilities. A lot of things, at least it gives you, what I'll be using for is it gives you a landscape of the occupation, not just locally. Because just like social media, in life, when you've just been in one area of healthcare for a long extent of time, you kind of see everything in a vacuum. So it's interesting to see all the other stuff going on, all around the country, all around the world. The staffing crisis situation that was kind of going around all last year. It's still an ongoing thing, but for us, we're kind of in a staffing crisis. And I'm not saying my facility person, I'm saying our whole region is in a staffing crisis because there's more openings than there are nurses that can fill them. So to me, I'm well, why the hell are these people freaking out when it's okay, well, I tell this to people at work all the time, you guys don't bring more aides, we need more aides. All right, well, do you look outside right now? Is there a long line of people with resumes that we can bring in? No. So there's just not enough people to fill these positions. Where once I started getting involved in like the actual medical community on Twitter, the nursing community on Twitter, you start to see that there actually are facilities outside of this area all around the country that are just refusing to hire people based on the bottom line. So, if I didn't know that, I could change my whole perspective on the safe staffing and the staffing. I mean, a lot of the concepts of the staffing ratios I still disagree with, but in general terms, it kind of just molded my perspective into something different because, I really was living in just this central New York vacuum of what the nursing, kind of world was. So, not that I've wanted to get away from content, I just haven't had a lot of time to build that content, but the connections and the acquaintances that I've met via Nurse Nation Media, whether it be Instagram or Twitter, has really helped to mold my practice and kind of enhance my practice, actually.
Yeah, so you've used the podcast and the nursing content brand to really get a foot into a bunch of different circles and kind of build community and get a more holistic view of nursing around the country.
Yeah, and I wanted to, after those first 9 episodes, that were mostly all interviews of people and different types of individuals in healthcare. We had PT Journeys, Julie and Sean on talking about the physical therapy aspect. I've had, Melanie, she was from Colorado. She was from public health. I had her Twitter handles RN Kelly. She's a clinical specialist down in the Carolinas. So it was nice and interesting to get all those different viewpoints. But then I kind of I had this idea of doing it in like seasons. So like season 1, I was going to have that episode 1 through 9, just the introductory season, mostly just interviews, just trying to get your feet off the ground. And then my next season was taking the information that the United States Army, National Guard, how they train their field medics, and kind of breaking that down and comparing it to how nurses in critical care settings are kind of trained. Because to me, like having a conversation with Waz, one of our mutual friends, the Vuew medic, Dr. Waz, the National Guard medic, and when he came back from overseas and all of his credentials that he's accumulated through his Army career, he's able to perform more procedures and more interventions than I have ever, or in my setting now will ever do, and he can come out and not even be like an LPN, which to me is kind of disgraceful. Like this guy is over, plugging bullet wounds with his thumb and, essentially prescribing these medications out in the field based on these charts, and then he can come back and he can't even be, an LPN.
So there's zero correlation between the credentials in the military rankings or hierarchy and a civilian equivalent job.
The way he explained it to me was that you can leave with almost like a report card, like obviously a transcript, like anywhere else. But those like credits, there's only like a select amount of credits that apply to some sort of like nursing curriculum. So he'd have to go to school again, whether it be LPN or RN, for like the full 2 years, which is kind of crazy.
So I would imagine that discourages a lot of ex-military.
I would assume so, but I mean, there's a lot of questions that come with that. So that was what my next season was going to be, like breaking that down, having a conversation with him. How do you start to, build? How do you bridge that gap? How do we get these people who have all of this training to be able to have some sort of bridge program to get them into the medical field a little bit sooner at a position where they're doing things similar to what they were doing out in the field? Because to me, it's just a waste of time. Like, why would you train this person to essentially be, the most emergency room nurses, bullets flying over your head, you got all this stuff going on, and then you come back, oh, hey, you still have to do you still have to get a bachelor's to be an RN. It's like, what? It's crazy.
Yeah, if you could make it in combat, you could probably make it in a doctor's office,
exactly,
right?
Or where we are now in a nursing home. But that was kind of where I wanted to bring the direction to, and then football season started in the fall, and then new job in the wintertime, and then now it's the spring with the coronavirus going on, and it's been kind of crazy. So
no, it's understandable. Obviously, a bunch of different priorities get ahead of putting out content.
And then I had this other great idea where I was listening to, was it Rogan at first? It may have been, but they were talking about like all these like old like secret CIA projects in like the 50s, 60s, and 70s that were all uncovered by like Rockefeller and all these other different groups. And I wanted to get into the like ethical questions that came into that, like from the medical side of like doing all these random like drug experiments on people like unbeknownst. And I started coming up with that. I started coming up with like scripts and things I wanted to actually put out there as content for Nurse Nation Media. And then all this Corona stuff happened. And then I was thinking, well, you know what? Let me take what New York State, upstate New York, long-term care setting, how we're combating corona, all our guidelines, how they're constantly changing, giving a timeline, like that's interesting, right? And then literally you go to work and it's all corona. You come home, it's all corona. The whole world shut down because of corona. It's like, you know what? I don't want to talk about corona and have to put stuff out about coronavirus anymore.
So naturally, I'm going to ask you a few questions about corona here.
Okay. I'll do my.
How has the coronavirus affected your day-to-day in your facility, and have you guys felt any of the heavy repercussions of the issues that people are experiencing all across the country?
Well, I think if anyone says that they're not feeling the effects, they're obviously lying at this point, because it's not only just affecting the healthcare workers, but like I said before, the world's at a standstill. So it's affecting everybody. But it was very interesting, the timeline of my new roles and how this all kind of lined up. So around Christmas time, I left the double weekend supervisor position to take on the education and the infection control aspects of the nursing home. But I really took it because I loved the education part of it, and a majority of the education is doing our CNA classes. And I love taking people that, either want to better their lives or take a step in the medical direction, and becoming a CNA is like that first step for a lot of people, and it's an important step for a lot of people. So just being able to kind of educate people, make them, good CNAs. And so I started that out in December. We started a class it was supposed to be January. We started at the beginning of February. Was it February? No, I think we started actually the last week of January. Yeah, we started last week of January. So I think the second week or the third week was my birthday week, and that was the 7th. So we started like the last week of January, and a lot of those 3 weeks building up to that was just me preparing for this. And obviously, the basic skills that a CNA could do, you're taught those in nursing school. So to me, it was like, oh, this is gonna be easy. But then when you actually look at the curriculum that's provided to you, it's like, oh damn, like if I was put on the spot right now, like just like anything, you get a little nervous. So I took those 3 weeks and really just wanted to hammer the material down, wanted to get the skills down pat, wanted to find those little nuances, try to make things a little bit easier for people when I'm trying to educate people. So my first 3 weeks were mostly on the education aspect. And then we finished that class up March 9th, and literally the days after that, it was all coronavirus. So then it went from just the education aspect to the infection control aspect. So before, it would just be kind of like surveying, comparing your baseline of infectious diseases in the nursing home from previous years to what you have now, and reporting certain things and doing certain interventions based on a lot of the statistics that are involved in your home. And then I had never had a set routine for the infection prevention side of my job responsibilities. It was really, once I got out of that education aspect, those first few weeks, my infection control aspect was just all corona. So, we went from, and it was kind of silly at me at the beginning too, like I kind of went from, this is gonna be something like Ebola. Like we're gonna have this huge scare, like everyone's gonna be educated on all this stuff, we're gonna put in all these interventions, and it's never gonna hit us. Like we're getting all this information from China. Like when is China ever, truthful with anything they're giving out to us? And then as it kind of grew, I remember there was one day where literally it got so bad that we went from, okay, the new guidelines are schedule visitation time, screen people coming in, visitors, family, wearing the masks, educate on the hand hygiene. And then literally that was 9 o'clock in the morning. By noon, it was closing doors for all visitors. So everything happened kind of so fast.
And that was early March, first or second week of March?
The date that sticks out in my head is March 17th, and I don't know if that's because that was the official day that we closed off all visitation, or if it was a few days before that. But for some reason, like March 17th sticks out in my head.
That day makes sense.
That might have been the day where we were like, okay, visitors come now, and every time you change a policy, you have to send out you have to let all the residents know. They have to send out a letter to all their family members. So we had this letter drafted up. We sent it out in the mail in the morning about, hey, these are going to be our revised visitation schedules and policies based on what's going on with Corona. And literally 3 hours later, it was actually, just kidding, disregard that mail because now we're closed down for everything. So you got to make phone calls to everyone. Everyone's freaking out. But so we have no visitation. Obviously, we have to wear a mask inside the nursing home. Every time you walk into the building for your shift, you have to come in through our side entrance, which leads right to the nursing office. You have to get checked in, get your temperature taken. You get asked about all the questions about all the different symptoms. And then if you're cleared from that point, you can go to work. So that's just like the start of the day. That's how it's kind of changed everyone's kind of morning routines.
So obviously it makes sense to take all those steps, but knowing that the coronavirus could lie dormant you could be non-symptomatic for 10 days to 2 weeks. Is that really, I guess, getting the job done? Like what?
So anytime that anyone fails that preliminary assessment when they first walk in, automatically 7 days out of work. It used to be 14 days. But then because of the shortages of staffing, and that's the problem with New York State, is that everything that affects the city ends up affecting Upstate. So when they were sending out all their workers for 14-day quarantines, when they were such short staffing that they were going to come kind of like, okay, well, we got to change this. It's going to be 7 days. So then anyone that has like any of those symptoms, whether it be cough, sore throat, any respiratory symptom, even a temp, and they dropped regulations for temps. Temp used to be anything above or equal to 100.5. Now it's 100 even. Like you can't come to work for 7 days, no matter, even if it's, your heat was blasting in your car, or even at first it was if you have a smoker's cough, you had to be out for 7 days until your doctor could say, okay, here's a note that's saying, no, it's a smoker's cough. Thankfully, they kind of loosened that up and was like, okay, as a nurse, you can use your better judgment and you can actually say, oh, well, this person has had a cough. That's why every time we ask a question now, it's, do you have any new cough? We get a lot of smokers. So it's like, do you have any new cough? So 7 days automatically. Any people, new admissions that come in from the hospital, whether they've been tested or not, so they can come with a negative test 3 days ago, automatically on 14-day isolation, droplet isolation. So that means gown, glove, mask, anytime you walk into the room. We're wearing the mask anyway, so that's not a big deal, but anytime they come out of the room, have to have a mask on. If someone goes out to an appointment that they have to go to, we started canceling all the appointments that could be rescheduled, but if someone has to go to an appointment like dialysis, for example, that clock restarts every time they go out to an appointment, because you don't know who they've been exposed to. So they go into a private room, they're in isolation precaution, and then anyone in the facility that has some sort of abnormal vital sign or new sign of respiratory, either infection or disease process that can't be explained by something else. So if you have someone that has COPD and a cough, we're not gonna put them on drought precaution because they've had a chronic cough or chronic COPD. But if you have someone that all of a sudden, spikes a temp and now they have a cough, okay, whoa, you gotta go into an isolation room, 14 days, and then we're monitoring you from there. So that's kind of a lot of the new policies that we put into place.
How have you had to deal with the, I guess, resident responses to this? Have these changes gone over smoothly? Have people been upset about this? Are people really starting to get antsy to see their families?
A lot of our long-term care aren't as oriented, so do they kind of grasp what's happening? Hard to tell. Obviously you have that first transition period, but we never really had a lot of issues. A lot of times you get the people with dementia and, things that affect their mental capabilities, their mental capacity, any sort of change out of normal routine. You start to see behaviors, you start to see some sort of, whether it be an aggressive behavior, some sort of abnormal behavior from the norm. But we didn't really see a lot of that. Actually, we started doing the window visits, and we found that a lot of our residents are actually being more upset when they have the window visits than when they have no visits at all, when it's just like kind of a phone call or a FaceTime, just because it's right there. Your wife's right there. You want to be able to hug her, kiss her, see her. But we haven't had too many complaints on the resident side, and a lot of the people that we're getting in for new admissions that are oriented understand. Knock on wood. And I mean, it's an eventual inevitability, but as of right now, we haven't had anybody that has been COVID positive. One of the reasons for that is they put out the federal mandate that you can't deny anybody just because they're COVID positive from into a nursing home, which to me was strange because the elderly are the number one at-risk population. But then again, you can't overcrowd hospitals, so I understand on that aspect. But our corporate actually put out a corporate guideline that's saying that certain facilities, based on the amount of beds that they have, based on their capacity, the larger facilities will be getting the COVID positive. The smaller facilities, they'll try to keep those away for new admissions. A lot of it, I think, has to do with like the PPE numbers. Like they're only given a certain amount of PPE, so instead of spreading it across your 20 facilities, based on what your patient population is, divert all of your COVID positive people you're going to be getting into a few select facilities. Then you can increase those PPE numbers at those facilities, kind of spread it out a little bit more easier that way.
What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions around the coronavirus? You're obviously someone that has a little more insight into the way the disease actually works, and being in the healthcare field, will probably have a better analysis than most average people would.
In the beginning, in March, there's obviously a lot of misconceptions, but I think that's only because the regulatory bodies that are giving us the guidelines didn't have as much information. But now that it's been out there for, what are we, 8 weeks, 6, 7, 8 weeks, a lot of those myths have been debunked. Every once in a while now you get, what social media flips people's words into of how to treat different things, and, people actually trying them. So those are obviously misconceptions. But to say that there's a lot of misinformation where people don't know, the basics of the disease, we haven't really, had a lot of that issue. There was the big debate in the beginning: is it airborne, or is it just something you can take drop precaution for? Now it's just been droplet. Who knows if that's going to change, but it looks like that's going to be pretty steadfast. The biggest misconception were like when we had to conserve like surgical masks and N95s, and when everyone has the mass hysteria of, okay, it could be airborne, we're not sure, and then all the employees are like, oh my god, like they're only giving us surgical masks, we should all be getting N95s, and it's like, and then they're like, oh, we have to use the same mask over and over again until it's soiled or wet because there's something short, this is crazy, like I don't want to work, and it's like, you're putting me at risk, and it's like, you know what, it's actually, the masks aren't to protect you from the virus. I think that's one of the misconceptions that I think a lot of people have. The mask is to protect others from you, because like you mentioned before, like you can be asymptomatic and have the virus. So it's not, like I said before, we have no positives in the nursing home. So why are they telling us to wear masks? Well, it's not to protect you, the worker, it's to protect the residents, because you could be asymptomatic as well, keeping those droplets into you. So
yeah, and you're the one actually leaving the facility and coming in every day.
Exactly. So I think a lot of at least in our facility, the misconception was they're not giving us enough PPE to protect ourselves, like in just the mask aspect of it, where really it's not really to protect you, it's to protect the residents who haven't been leaving. You have nothing recorded in the home. You're the only one that has potential exposure. Again, it's not to protect you, it's to protect the residents. So just in my setting, that was the biggest misconception.
It seems like everybody and their mother has an opinion on how dangerous COVID really is, and are we overreacting, are we underreacting? And the way I look at it is, I don't think there's really a baseline to compare any of this against, and I would tend to trust the experts more so than anybody on something like this until I've been given a compelling reason otherwise. So, I think as long as we learn from this experience, I'm not really rushing to judgment whether we stayed locked down for too long or too little. I think the most important thing is that we move forward from this and are better prepared so that this doesn't happen again. How do you see this changing the healthcare system, and can you see, I guess, tangible things that'll be better in the future as a result of this?
That's tough to answer, just because I'm not a policymaker, and I don't think like a policymaker in that aspect, like national policy or worldwide global policy with certain things. What do I see changing like day-to-day life? Like I don't think you'll ever see the plastic shields go down at cash registers. I think we'll always have those now, almost like the convenience stores or the corner stores in the city. You'll always have those up there. Not only does it protect you against what other people can have, but if you have the bulletproof ones like in New York City, it's also for security as well. So I don't think you'll see that change. I think we'll actually start to move more towards plastic currency than the continued exchange of dollar bills, coins, all that kind of stuff. But that's like one of the hot topics is, we weren't prepared for something like this. So we should have had more tests already. I'm not someone who was in that room, in that meeting, having those conversations, so I don't like to speculate as to what those conversations were. I don't know what information people who make policies had at the time that certain policies were made. What I do know is that you can't stockpile tests and materials just in case something happens, because then things have expiration dates, like anything. So you make the specific corona test 5 years ago because you thought that corona was going to be hitting you. Well, what happens if it never did? Now you have 5 years worth of supplies that are expired in a bunker somewhere. So to kind of speculate and to say like this is what I think should happen, I'm not real comfortable saying that, because again, like I said, I don't have all the information. Who knows who you can trust anymore with all this information? That's why I always tell people, here's something from a news outlet, always double check. Not like double check, against another news outlet, but read into it more. Like, who's the writer? What are their sources? Are these sources credible? That's why I hate when people post all these posts on Facebook when they just read the headline. It's like, oh my God, Florida's reopening their beaches. I mean, they were closed completely. They reopened them for physical activity, still want the social distancing. Apparently, you're still not supposed to go there. But I don't know. To say that we were underprepared, we're not prepared at all. Yeah, we had PPE shortages. Yeah, we had a shortage of tests. But again, we'd been fine all the way up until this point. I mean, the problem is that we were at like a 75-year nap between the last crazy pandemic and this here now. So, how do you stay prepared, but in a financially smart way as well?
Yeah, I definitely see your point there. I think people are very quick to rush to judgment, and obviously a hot topic has been the president and his administration's response to the crisis, and I'm not interested in really taking a side either way. I'm more so just interested in analyzing all the facts objectively and reaching my own conclusions. I think that we tend to sensationalize things and forget that any preparation we may have made in previous years would have come with an associated cost. And people in times of crisis tend to throw that line of thinking out the window, and it's just, we should have done this and this and this, and without thinking about the cause and effect. Yeah. And I'm not saying that, the effect of better preparedness wouldn't have been worth the associated cost, because it probably would have been. But I think that a lot of times these issues are a lot more complex than meet the eye, and most people don't have any interest in going beneath the surface on those issues. Like, I think that, believe whatever you want about President Trump and his administration's response to this, but I don't think that there's really a baseline to evaluate it against. And of course, there are a lot of things you could point to, and I'm not interested in defending one, political ideology or preserving certain talking points. I just think that nobody really knows as much as they think they do, and nobody really has a complete picture of all the information to make these assessments. So,
well, I think the important thing that people forget is that we're dealing with microbes, things that you can't see. And I think every number and statistic that's thrown at us on a daily basis are all lag numbers. So I think things look a little more scary when you're always trying to play catch up. So once you found one person that's infected, there's going to be two others that are going to be infected. So to say that we could have contained it when we just had the first handful of cases in January, I'm a big proponent. Like, what's a hot topic now is this antibody testing. Do people have the coronavirus antibodies showing that they've had the virus in the past? And then from that step, do these antibodies protect you against every single little rDNA strand against each little coronavirus? But I started looking into it because even before, I was saying this had to have been in our country way before we even started making this out to be what it is now in February, March, now into April. If you just look at and I've done this myself, that's why I had that speculation. I was like, okay, well, let me do some more research. If you look at just the amount of flights and people coming out of Wuhan, China, every week for the past year, there's been at least 3 flights from Wuhan directly to San Francisco. 150 people at least a flight. That's 450 people coming from Wuhan, every week, just right into San Francisco. So not even counting how many flights from Italy come into JFK. And Wuhan has direct flights over to JFK. So it's like, you're telling me that they had this disease that they didn't know or have a name for until the new year. They're going back to October, November, saying, retroactively diagnosing these cases in China. And you're saying now we only had 6 in January? It doesn't really, just the travel patterns.
The rate, the current averages and what the trends and data currently indicate don't match up with that narrative at all. If you were to plug and play some of those numbers back then, just based on the travel volume. Yeah, and I think people, for some reason, people feel better about themselves when they can cling on to a rigid stance on this. Like, everybody's convinced one way or another, and my thing is, I just want to know the truth, and I really don't care which side it aligns with politically, or who might be offended by it. I just want to observe all the information and reach my own conclusions. And you see it all the time on Facebook, and just the quick reaction culture of, we're doing too much, we're doing too little, this is ridiculous, this is an infringement on rights. And I could understand certain points from any of these arguments, but I just think that there's a whole complete picture that most of us are lacking. And I don't even feel comfortable speaking on a lot of these things. And I feel like I've taken the time to try to understand the bigger picture. So to me, it's like, why do people feel the need to rush to these judgments, and why do people feel so strongly about these convictions they hold?
I start to feel bad for our policymakers and politicians now, because like Cuomo just released today, New York State's run out of money in their unemployment fund, and I guess apparently they're supposed to be being retroactively refunded by the federal government. But you're stuck between making the best decision for the people health-wise and making the best decision for the people economically as well. So it's like, how do these people, at some point you're going to be at a place where it's going to end up being, it's going to hurt you more in the long run because of the financial impacts of shutting down everything than it would have ever been for the the death rate. But it's how do you portray that to people? How do you say, you know what, we don't care about the deaths because we have to keep going economically? Because I think people are so short-term minded. It's tough to explain the long-term repercussions.
Yeah, there's no way to concisely aggregate all of the relevant data points and balance out the needs of the economy and the needs of saving individual lives and understanding how many of these lives would have been lost anyway, or what understanding the entirety of the cause and effect chain here. It's really tough for a leader to articulate that and to be able to deal with some of the associated criticism. And you're always going to have naysayers and people that aren't going to agree just based on the politics of Governor Cuomo. Like, I've seen Governor Cuomo do some amazing things during this time, and just because he's been a traditional liberal Democrat, people are just up in arms at everything he says. And I see a guy that's working hard and trying his best to save lives and protect people, and some people just want to slander every word he says, and much like people do with President Trump.
Well, and that's what the shitty part about this, everything now turns political this day and age. And the shitty part about this being political is if you go back and look at the timeline, and I'm not saying that I endorse one party or person over the other, but if you look at the timeline, we shut down travel, at least from China to and from, in January. And if you look at just the flip side, the Democratic side, you have people like Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer who was saying that was xenophobic to do. Like, we shouldn't have done that. And you have people like Nancy Pelosi who are saying that they should have went out. What was it, the Chinese New Year in January, February, where they're like, no, you should be out there celebrating. That's now you look back at it, now they're all bashing Trump for the way he reacts to it now. Well, a few months ago you were saying go out there and party with the Chinese New Year, and closing down transportation was xenophobic. So it's like, who do you trust? And that's why I hate that it has turned such like a political mess than it is really, here are the straight facts.
And it's crazy how fast a headline or just a random tweet from somebody that's really not qualified to speak on any of it can escalate to 500,000 retweets and favorites in a few hours. And, that contributes to a ton of misinformation being spread. And I'm a huge fan of social media, so I'm not trying to say that that's a bad thing or that's a net negative for society. But I do think often about how the fact that, when you look back on history in 1920 during the Spanish flu outbreak, people there wasn't even 1918, there wasn't even cable news. You couldn't even, there wasn't cable news at that point, no, right?
No.
That was pre-World War I. So you couldn't even, you were basically, you were in the dark. You had no idea what was actually going on. You tried to take whatever precautions you could. You knew that there was a disease going around, and you just dealt with it and you moved on. But today, more than ever, everyone's connected. Everyone can voice an opinion. Everyone can, so there's a lot more potential for different opinions and for, I guess, different reactions to the policies that policymakers release. So, one negative opinion or one dissenting thought on a policy could be portrayed in the media as if it's actually thought by millions of people, when in reality it's really just a few rogue individuals saying something. So I think often about how the effect of that, everyone having a voice on Twitter and everyone being able to put out reactions and what it's done. What would this response have looked like 20 years ago compared to now?
But the one thing, though, on the flip side of that I enjoy about Twitter is that if someone doesn't want to be misquoted or misrepresented in some sort of news article or whatnot, you have the ability to go out there and put out exact quotes.
Oh, exactly.
Your
And
account.
I think about that all the time. Like, I wish more politicians would just turn the camera on themselves,
Yeah.
put up a very direct and articulate response to something and address it. Because there's obviously falsifications in the mainstream media all the time, and people get misquoted, things get taken out of context. And I wish more people, President Trump likes to go to Twitter to do it a lot, but he's not the most articulate or soft or convincing in the way he does it. But I wish we had some good quality leaders that would speak directly to the people with a untainted tone. So and I'm a huge fan of Twitter. I'm not saying any of this to say that it's a bad thing.
Oh, no, I love Twitter. Twitter's my favorite social media platform.
I think Twitter is a net positive overall. And in saying all this, I think it is a good thing that people have these voices. We're just going to have to learn how to navigate in crises like this.
Well, the other problem is that there's always someone, and no matter what the crisis is, there's always someone or group of people that benefit financially from some sort of crisis, whether it be a wartime crisis or this crisis now, healthcare. So, what influence do those people have over different policy making and news production and whatnot?
No, exactly, and especially in an election year, like I don't think some people will stick to the death of it that this is a politicized push to make Trump look bad for the election, and the other side will say, no, this is very serious. The Republicans are not taking it seriously. They're trying to make it seem like a witch hunt on Trump, and I think that any sensible person should agree that there's clear political motivation to make Trump look bad here. And I'm not saying that he has done a good or bad job, because I really don't know. But I think that you could hold both of those opinions that, this is a very serious thing. And I also think that it's obvious that there would be motivation from the opposing party to make it look bad on the sitting president, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't think you have to pick one side or the other. It's crazy to me that people really can't hold both of those things to be true.
Expanding on that comment, it's crazy that, to me at least, people think, or at least the mass majority of people that I interact with, you can't have two thoughts. Like, you can't have parallel thoughts. Like, you can't say, okay, this is true, but yet this side of it is also true. Like, you either have to have, and I'm trying to come up with some sort of analogy or
No, I think I've heard certain quotes, and I can't even say who said it, but basically a really intelligent person who has their wits about him has the ability to hold two contradicting thoughts in their head without losing their mind.
Exactly.
So, and I think I try to model that in most of my approaches to how I think about things. So it's a thing that most people don't do, for sure.
Here's a good example. Like, I can understand why, with New York City being the epicenter now of Corona, and all of the guidelines that are put into place statewide, why people are upset with it also affecting Upstate. But yet, I also can have that same thought process of, I understand why it's affecting Upstate as much as it's affecting the city. But I mean, some people, like right now, you either have to be, especially in New York, you are either against Cuomo saying that it should only be this stuff should only be in New York City, or Southern tier, and we shouldn't, it shouldn't affect Upstate like this, or people are like, no, it has to, it should, all statewide should be good. But you can't. People don't want to say that they can see from both sides, and
yeah, I think you have to be able to have empathy to understand, the arguments from both sides. And Governor Cuomo and his staff's position, they obviously have to take precaution over everything, because nobody will forgive them if there were to be, another outbreak or another 100,000 deaths after the fact. I think that their primary concern is going to be to keep the numbers as low as they can, and in a short time frame of 3 to 6 months, I think that's probably the right thing to do. And again, back to what I was saying earlier, I think we should try our best to learn from this. If this is a repeat thing every year, we're going to obviously have to adjust the way we've gone about handling this. And I wouldn't want this to be the new norm every winter. But I think in a short window, we need to really understand the data and do whatever we can to take proper steps. But I also believe that we've completely thrown any sense of fiscal responsibility out the window with the way we're handling this economically. We're just essentially printing money and running up debt like we never have before, and nobody wants to talk about the future impact that's going to have. And I'm not the most qualified person to speak on the macroeconomic effects of it, but I know that we're introducing trillions of dollars of debt into a system that otherwise wouldn't have had it. So I think we need to be cognizant of the effect that's going to have, while also understanding that we have lives to protect.
Exactly, and that kind of goes back. That could have been the perfect analogy that I'm using. It's that like I previously stated, like I don't want to be in a policymaker's position right now to have to weigh the short-term benefits of death versus the long-term benefits of economics, because a lot of people, majority of people, can't see both sides of that argument, and they can't understand that. And again, I don't want to have to say something that ends up coming off that I'm insensitive to the people who are actually being affected by this coronavirus and being affected at the most extreme ways by being deaf. But then you also have to look at the very real reality that there is a huge macroeconomic effect of that all this has, that it may take years for us to recover from, depending on how far this goes.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think just being aware of that is not a crime. Some people want to torture anyone who even speaks of the economic impact this is having, and you're all of a sudden you're insensitive. You don't care about the people that are sick and the families, and of course you do, but that's just the headline culture we're in. And I think we need to be more real and transparent and have these conversations and have more thoughtful discourse on things like this.
So what about you? I know like a lot of your stuff, getting people into this directory and spreading the word of the directory, like you can do so much now on social media and the internet that way, but you lose out on that face-to-face meeting with a lot of these business owners trying to get onto like the directory, and a lot of other stuff that you're doing. Like, has it affected, how much has it affected you?
Yeah, I think it's tough this is obviously not a climate where people are, from a business perspective, looking to spend money and expand. Everyone's kind of in fight or flight right now, looking to just survive and kind of maintain and fix the processes they have right now. I don't think it's exactly a environment where I'm going to bring on a ton of new business, but from the Upstate Vuew directory perspective, I'd probably be just reaching out to a lot of people over social media anyway. So that as first intro, so that hasn't really been a big change, but I would like the ability to go, to do more of these podcasts in person. I'm going to have to start thinking about how I could build out an infrastructure to do these virtually if I want to put out as much content as I do want to. But it hasn't had a tremendous effect on my day-to-day. I've been working out of the apartment now. The incubator co-working space has been closed for about a month now. So that's been tough to get used to, just being in the house all day. But overall, it hasn't had a huge effect on what I'm doing. And if anything, I've become more focused the last month because I've had less distractions.
You have really no excuse at all.
No excuse to not get things done. I've been able to get up early and not really have my attention diverted at all.
So with what you've explained to me, kind of what your vision is for this directory, I can see, just kind of like spit things off the top of my head, and then if they're rational ideas or not, either way, but of ways to kind of capitalize on it, because you're having all of these restaurants, bars, and whatnot to close down. I can only do takeout, I can only do delivery, like they're hurting for money. And the premise, from what we've explained before, of what Vuew and all the different aspects and different avenues of Vuew was essentially to help drive in revenue for these companies. Are there other like nuances that you've tried to add or thought of to help these businesses in this time that you kind of altered the way Vuew kind of is?
The original, my master thesis or master app idea, including more of the, physical location businesses, but bars, restaurants, retail stores, that is kind of separate from what I'm doing with the directory right now in terms of mapping the digital space of the creators and anyone putting out content online. But on that front, I think people are really pushing to support local companies right now. So I think giving more visibility to the people that have side hustles that may not be working right now or maybe laid off, but they're making products out of their home, or they're putting out content like this, or they can do something remotely, like any of those skills. I think the virus situation has played a big role in me wanting to drive more attention to those people. So I would say that right now it is an opportune time to try to build something like I am. And even though you might not be like I'm trying to draw a physical connection between people that are based in the same area and putting out things digitally, they might not be able to see each other in person, I think there still is a certain context that people get from knowing that somebody's in the same area as them. So although you might not be able to like physically link up with a nurse working in a local hospital right now to talk for Nurse Nation or to put out content, you will contextually be able to reach out to her and say, hey, like, let's do a phone call, and you could instantly talk about things related to the area and to, local hospitals, and you have a better idea of what's going on up here. So it's like creating those connections locally, even if they're not in-person interactions. I think it's still powerful, the effect that this current situation is having. So
whereas like, you brought this example before, if you're not following that person's page on Facebook or Instagram, any sort of social media platform, or you're not friends with someone who shared that post, you may not even know that even exists at a local level. So I mean, just having a directory to saying, okay, hey, I'm looking for someone that does this, or someone that is in this type of avenue locally. You can type in what you're looking for on Facebook, but then you're bombarded with all this information. So
yeah,
you just get it just to the localized people.
And there's definitely fragmentation of platforms. So you have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, even TikTok, podcasts, Spotify, Apple Music. Like there's a million different platforms where some of this information is siloed, and then on top of each of those platforms is all the specific and complexities of those platforms. So you're seeing on Facebook, you're seeing comments, you're seeing every other normal kind of post from of your aunt's dog and the kids, like things that aren't necessarily related to the services or creatives you're looking for in an area. So I'm kind of abstracting that layer out and creating more of like a social phone book for people that are putting out more branded type content or business like ventures rather than just like an individual sharing things about their life. So I'm kind of simplifying things and just trying out the concept to see how, if you're interested in cars, or you're interested in music, or you're a musician, or you have a podcast, or you take photos, you're a videographer, like any of those things, I want people to be able to make those connections with people in the area without having to see all the clutter of, the Facebook or the disorganization of Instagram. So it's kind of just tying all those things into one place and letting people get in touch with each other.
So someone who their goals and aspirations are so closely tied to social interaction and social media interaction, more specifically, you're on every single platform. You obviously study the trends for every platform, try to get ahead of the curve. My question is, what is the main difference?
Are you flipping this interview on me right now?
Almost. What is the main difference between what we have now in TikTok and what we had back in the day with Vine?
I don't think there was much of one at all. I think the Vine was 15 seconds only? Yeah, I think, and the creative tools that have been built on top of TikTok are far more advanced. The market is much more prime. More people have smartphones now. More younger kids have smartphones. Apple Music, Spotify, all the platforms are allowing more independent songs to go out. So people are doing dances, doing a million different things. People are, playing a bunch of different music. There's way more ways to customize your videos today than there was 5 years ago. And more kids have phones in their hands.
So the main reason of why TikTok is flourishing and Vine has been gone for years now, you think it's just how far we've advanced as society?
Yeah, I think it's a big timing issue. I think Vine was a little bit ahead of its time to reach the level of scale that TikTok has, for sure. And I think that TikTok's tech is amazing. Like they're pretty flawless in how they've rolled this out, and I think it's a great product. So yeah, I don't think Vine was a bad product by any means. I just think it was a little bit before its time, and people weren't as likely to pull out their smartphone. And just like think about how over time Instagram has lowered, first Facebook, then Instagram and Twitter has lowered the minimum age of entry to these platforms. Like younger kids are using them, and then on the high side, like even my mother is on TikTok now, and if it wasn't for Instagram and Facebook, my mother would have never gotten TikTok. Is like the first. So I guess it's kind of like a gateway type effect where older people migrated to Facebook after the high school kids got done with it and got sick of it. Then they went to Instagram, and now it's kind of trickled down to TikTok. So I think that more people are just more acceptable, or people are more accepting of a platform like that today than they were 5 years ago.
I think it's a cliche thought, because it's obviously so true that technology expands, diversifies, and enhances at such a rapid pace that you can't keep up with it. But it's so crazy to think about that just 11, 12 years ago, you had to have a college email address to create a Facebook account. Like you had to have that at something.edu just to be able to create a Facebook. And now you got people making fake Facebook accounts, Finstagrams, like all this crazy stuff, like parody accounts on Twitter. It's crazy to see how just a
long tail of social media.
11 years in the technology world is a million years, but still, I mean, just 11 years in just reality is still crazy.
No, I say this all the time, but the things that we take for granted, going away from social a little bit, but just to the technology side, like if you were to say when we were seniors in high school that in 2020 you'd be able to look at your phone and unlock it with your face, or even the touch print, like you would have said you're crazy, like that's futuristic, like that's Jetsons, that's not happening. And today we do it like in 2 days after it came out, we're like, oh yeah, that's normal.
Well, just think about what the top apps were when the first iPod Touch came out. The gun app. We've had this conversation before. The gun app where you press the button, it makes the gun noise.
The beer drinking app.
The Zippo app.
The functionality was not potential usefulness wasn't even known yet at that point. So,
and when did we start changing the word that is an emotion of feeling content to it being content? Now, a completely different word with a completely different meaning.
I don't know if I've heard that one as much as you.
Like, has it at one point? I don't think anything was ever like, oh, this is great content. Like using the word content.
Oh, okay, in that regard.
Whereas if the same spelling and different syllable pronunciation, it's just being, hey, I'm content in my situation. Now we've completely revamped that. Now it's
I never really thought about that.
Where it used to be maybe just like material or information. Now it's like, you have content.
Because back 10 years ago, two idiots like us weren't sitting in a basement putting out content. People were watching the news.
Oh, true.
So, yeah, there's been a lot of evolution and it's moving so fast and it really is tough to keep up with everything. Like, I like to think that I mix in a ton of different stuff like every single day, but like at the end of the day, I don't really know half of what's actually going on in the tech social world. Like there are new things happening every single day, and anyone claiming to know it all is just is not being truthful with themselves. So
would this be the right platform to have like an unsolicited humble brag
for you?
I just want to put it out there, and not even just for people that I don't know because they won't understand, but just for like our like knit group of friends. I just want to say that the social media like branding, I was way ahead of that back in 2011.
Oh, you and Joe Cantales are two people that were just way out of the curve.
I mean, I was like 18. I was like, dude, Alpha Squad, gotta make it a brand.
If you were well funded, and if you didn't have other distractions of school and life, you 100% could have made that into something.
Oh, absolutely.
And at the time, like none of us, we made fun of you. I mean, I've always supported hustle, and I've tried not to be too, fixed-minded on stuff like that. But I didn't really understand it to the level you did. And looking back on it, it was an amazing idea. I mean, there's probably 3 Alpha Squads right now that are doing the same thing, or Alpha Mentality, Alpha Life.
But I just want to say, humble brag, I was ahead of the branding content game. I was basically Gary.
You were. So, Pat has taken a roundabout way to get where he is now. And no one, growing up, I didn't really see him being a nurse, but there's many sides of Mr. Fricola, and he definitely, for the record, was way ahead of the game on the social media branding, creating direct-to-consumer type brands. Pat was a thought leader of the area, really was. I didn't know many others doing it. So one day when I'm famous, that's what I'm going for. This will be on record. Pat Fricola, genius.
I like to be a very worldly, very cultured person. Because like I said at the beginning, like I kind of wanted to get away from
this interview went from very scripted to.
That's the whole point of it, right?
I love
that's
it.
the best of it.
No one's listening anyway.
No,
it's like Metro News 1.
Just Leaky. Shout out Leaky. But. Now where's I going? Now you threw me off.
Yeah, you're a cultured man. You're very worldly.
See, like I said at the beginning, I kind of wanted to move away from the interview style because sometimes I just don't like talking to people. So
at the end of the day, who actually cares what we're saying?
Exactly. But I try to stay pretty worldly and well-rounded so that if I ever in the position where I have to have a conversation with somebody, at least I try to have some sort of material to discuss with somebody. But
yeah, I do. I think, especially in the beginning, just starting off, like it's not like you're a polished guest frequenting talk shows or I'm this amazing interviewer. I think I have potential to be good, but I think that a little bit of natural serendipity or just like banter back and forth is better than a scripted. It's not like we're going to attract a huge following from this interview. It's going to be our family and friends listening, and hopefully they like something we have to say, and we could gain a few
only takes
people
one
listening.
Share, dude.
But yeah, no, I think what we say is valuable. But I guess people like Gary Vee talk about this all the time, like overvaluing production value and perfection is very overrated. It's just putting stuff out there and reaching the right audience eventually through volume, in my opinion. But anyway, we've been talking for a good while now. To wrap this up, I got some rapid fire questions for you.
Okay, rapid fire, bring it on.
Current shows you're streaming during this quarantine: Hulu, Netflix.
Designated Survivor on Netflix.
Jack Bauer 2.0.
Yep. Kiefer Sutherland, great show. It got terrible reviews, second, third season when I looked up online, but whatever. I love it. It's great.
Is it guaranteed for more seasons, or are the reviews that bad?
I don't know. Like, I thought it was just a Netflix show. When I looked it up, there was like reviews from like when it was on ABC.
It was on like FX or something.
Yeah, I'm confused. But either way, I enjoy it. I love it. We're watching that right now. We watched Love Is Blind like 4 weeks ago. That was so bad that it was addicting. That was a Netflix show.
What's this new Friday Night Lights like high school football show? You watching that?
Is that I think Kara tried to get, is that the All American?
All American, yeah.
Kara said she watched the first one. She said that I would like it, but we never really got into it. I'm a diehard Friday Night Lights fan, so I don't like anything taking the shine away from that. Like, I'll just go back and watch Friday Night Lights again. That was a great show.
So what does a typical morning for you look like? Are you a routine guy, or are they just random?
Every time you ask me this, I always say I have to get back into a routine, and it's been like 6 months since I told you that before, and I still haven't gotten into a routine. So my mornings are usually, baby's been in a sleep regression. He usually sleeps till 7:30. Now it's like 5 o'clock, so it usually starts with him crying and running into our bed and me like, oh, the day has to start. And then it turns into me having to force myself to get up out of bed, Carrie yelling at me to get up so I'm not late to work, brushing my teeth, grabbing my clothes out of the dryer that I put in there the night before to get the wrinkles out, and then kind of just going to work. So no real morning routine.
Yeah, you've always been someone that's switching shifts all the time. You never really get locked into a consistent Monday through Friday, you know.
Yeah, no.
Wake up at the same time. Your weekends, you've worked overnights, you've done it all. Yeah. So I'll give you a pass there. Favorite and least favorite thing about living in upstate New York?
My favorite thing about living in upstate New York is the change of season. Like, everyone's like, oh my God, I hate the snow. Well,
Big 4 seasons guy, huh?
Big 4 seasons, including the pizzeria. Shout out 4 Seasons Pizzeria, Marshall, New York. But, not the hotel. I love, obviously, I enjoy, like they say, you can't enjoy the sunshine without the rain. There's something about going through all 4 seasons. It just makes you have better appreciation for everything. Like, you can't enjoy the summer that much if you didn't have a shitty winter and a shitty spring. You can't enjoy the winter. If it's way too hot for me in the summer, I start to sweat. Yeah. I need the AC. As soon as it hits 65, the AC in my car is cranking. So, I mean, to me, I enjoy the winter because it's not as hot out. But then I enjoy the summer because it's not as cold as the
I'm with you.
So my favorite thing is the 4 seasons. My least favorite thing is that I always feel like we're behind. We're always in like some sort of like, rapid fire to me having to say My least favorite thing about living in upstate New York is that it literally feels, and the joke is that we are the armpit of New York State. It literally sometimes feels like that. Like, we have all these rundown factories, like, you know, our prices on a lot of things are always crazy and through the roof. Like, there's not a lot of, unless you're in like healthcare or criminal justice, there's something with computers. There's not a lot of in between of where you can make money in the area. So I think the area, like the poverty level of the area is a little high for me. But my favorite thing is the seasons. My least favorite thing would be the poverty-stricken area that we are living.
No, fair enough. Favorite accounts you're following on social media right now? Whether that's just comedy, just someone that puts out interesting or funny stuff.
On a personal level, like my personal Instagram accounts, Barstool, sports, anything that has to be involved with sports. I mean, now it's tough because there are no like real sports going on. There's like this old, what's it called? Old Time Ball or something like that kind of shows all old like sports highlight clips. Like, that's some of my favorite stuff. Social media on a personal level for me, like I said, is news, but a lot of my news is like sports oriented because I'm a big sports guy. On a professional level, like for Nurse Nation, I mentioned her name before, Kelly Reap on Twitter. She's always sparking great conversation, like medical conversations on Twitter. A lot of times I don't contribute to the conversations. It's kind of like just like a sit back and look to see how people are reacting and interacting. She's involved with what they call bedside chats or chats from bedside. I forget what the actual phrases that they use, but like every Monday there's a different topic and they invite all these different Twitter personalities into this conversation to have. So she's a pretty interesting one to follow on the Twitter side.
Interesting. I wasn't going to ask this question. This was a late write-in, but how will Tom Brady do in Tampa Bay this season? Both of us are Patriots fans over the years.
I think he's going to give it one hell of a shot. I think he's going to have 2 years down in Tampa. He's got Gronk,
Little
Howard.
Is it going to be like the same fiery Brady or more of a retirement tour type deal?
I think it's going to be like the kid that was always sheltered in high school and then went away to college, like a party school. I mean, you go 20 years with the strict rules, regulations, and it's all about winning, and obviously it still is about winning with Tom. But now he let loose a little bit. He's putting out videos of him blowing the seashell, get Gronk in. I think it's going to be interesting and fun to see this version of Brady.
We're rambling a little bit, but will Guerrero be allowed on the sideline, you think?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. I think Tom has a lot more leeway.
It's Tom Brady, bro.
Exactly.
Where is PFRAC and where is Nurse Nation in 5 years?
In 5 years, good question. I'd really like to see myself in some sort of education role at some sort of nursing institution, some sort of nursing school. That's always been my goal. Where do I see Nurse Nation? I'd like to turn that into something that's more educational. Like I want to create it into a content stream of CNA skill videos, nursing skill videos. I want it to be a hub of where people can go and use it as some sort of viable resource, whether it be for your personal healthcare career or like for me, for example, with our CNA class, there's this great YouTube channel called For Your CNA that shows all the skills and all these great videos. I'd like to eventually kind of build it to be that, where you want to see something about and that's why the thing with Voodoo Medic was so such a great idea for me. It was so interesting for me is that if you want to see something about combat, Army combat training for medic training, if you want to see how different people handle different situations like an ER and ICU, like eventually that's what I'd like to build up to be some sort of educational content brand.
Love it. So my final question, if you could leave people with one message or piece of advice, either personally or professionally, what would that be?
Never stop learning. Never stop gathering information. There's no excuse nowadays with the internet and the amount of resources that we have at our fingertips to ever want to stop learning, whether it be for your job, whether it be for personal gains, just something that you're just interested in as a hobby. Never stop learning. Use social media for the good points that it has. Twitter, great source for news, but like I said, always do your due diligence. Never take your favorite persona as gospel all the time. Do your due diligence, never stop learning. Those are the two things I would say.
Definitely agree with all of that. Well, thanks, Patrick. Thank you to anyone who was listening. Check out Pat, Nurse Nation Media, on Twitter, Instagram. He has a podcast. He's putting out stuff all over the place. If you're interested in healthcare, nursing, or just following an interesting person, check out Pat Fricola and Nurse Nation. Thank you.
Peace.
Yeah.